Congregation may be seated. There may be few things more gratifying than saying or doing something that's just what was needed. Few things are more likely to change your life than hearing or receiving just what you needed. They don't always come as self-evident. My first philosophy paper in college came back with the instructions to do it again. Well, I was a first-term freshman who did not yet have writing and research. That was not till spring semester for me, so I was directed by the professor to their help center. The person there showed me how poorly put together the paper was, how it did not flow, but just meandered. There was no building on what had previously been written. So I was shown how to put together my thoughts in a more orderly, understandable way that actually, like I said, flowed. I rewrote it, and I think it came back with a C. It was well worth the lesson. That do-over resulted in introducing me how to write a paper or write anything that makes sense. That in turn has affected everything I have written since, including sermons. That do-over and help center were just what was needed. Then there's the good feeling when you are the one who brings what was needed. And I recall that when I was a student chaplain at Trenton State Prison, one inmate was very clear he did not want to talk with me because he did not want to hear about my white God. At one point, he threw a hardcover book at me. Thank goodness for bars and prison doors. And suddenly, though, it was given to me to say, well, my God isn't white. My God does not have a color. The Bible says God is light. Put light into a prison, you get every color. He stood there dumbfounded. I don't know if it helped him in his concept of God, but for a long time it helped me. I felt I was given to say just what was needed at that point. Now those are small-scale cases, I suppose. Joseph, in Genesis 45, gives us another but big-scale perspective on what was needed. As he introduced himself to his brothers, who had beaten him bloody and sold him into slavery years ago, he said, "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God." What was needed? Well, let us remember that the man who said this was once on the immature side. He had dreams of his older brothers bowing down to him and serving him, and he told them these dreams. It's one thing to have such dreams and keep your mouth closed. It's another thing to let your brothers know, "I have these dreams where I will rule over you and you will bow down to me." Oh, that's cool. Add on to this that Joseph was already his father Jacob's favorite at that point. This is a bad way to nurture brotherly love. Now, I would not say Joseph had it coming, no way, but he was a bit of a diva. Then he is betrayed by his brothers, forcibly removed from his family by his family, and made a servant in Egypt. Now, he shows his righteousness when he refused to yield to the advances of Potiphar's wife. He would not go to bed with her. So she charged him with rape, and he went to jail. In jail, he again showed his maturity by rising to the level of running the jail under oversight. In prison terms, he was a trustee, or a trustee, because he was trusted to have oversight over other prisoners. He helped fellow inmates by interpreting their dreams. We know that because of this, and his gift for that, he got to interpret Pharaoh's dream about the 7 fat cows being eaten by the 7 skinny cows, and they stayed skinny, symbolizing the devastation of the coming 7 years of famine after 7 years of plenty. That was Pharaoh's dream. You couldn't interpret it, Joseph did. So preparations were made, and he was the point man of setting aside food during the years of plenty, so when the famine did hit, Egypt would have food and to spare. What was needed? He'd been through a lot, good and bad, mostly bad. And yet he is able to tell those guys who were responsible for his suffering and alienation that God sent him there with a long-range plan that no one at the time could see. In fact, he is so overcome with emotion in their presence. When he's going to tell them who he is, we heard Andre read, and he wept so loud that the Egyptians heard it. And he told everyone to leave the room with his brothers. The Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. This is loud, way out loud sound. He doesn't blame his brothers. He sees only the good that came out of the evil due to the providence of God. What was needed? Some persons are understandably uncomfortable with the idea that God designed this bad trip so that there would be later food for the children of Abraham when famine came. Well, what is the connection between God and when bad things happen to good people? Can you and I always affirm that God is behind every wicked thing that ends up with a silver lining or a bigger blessing than the cost? Or would you say that God did not have those brothers do what they did to Joseph with an eye to what would happen later on, but that the brothers gave God lemons and God and Joseph made lemonade? I do not mean to simplify the issue or even attempt to answer it here. I do want to acknowledge that such questions are in this story. The story, as we have it, has Joseph seeing God sending him there for this much later on good thing to keep Israel going, or what was to become Israel. The story does also have Joseph reminding his brothers that, quote, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt." Even as he who said it also said it was not them who sent him there but God. What was needed? Joseph sees in the big picture, the one that includes his imprisonment, the sweep of dream interpretations, reading Pharaoh's dream aright, and saving people from starvation as part of God's providence. It was something that was needed. Joseph being sold into slavery so he could end up being in Egypt to read the dream and save lives was what was going to be needed and what was needed when it came. For thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, including the people who would become Israel. But you know what? Joseph being there and the course of action that got him there was not all that was needed. In order for God's plan to work, so Jacob's family and their descendants could eat for 5 years and then evolve into the Hebrews who became Israel, something more than Joseph being there was needed. Joseph had to forgive his brothers, as he did. They were dumbstruck by it, blown away that he was alive, and that he wept for joy in the reunion. He forgave them. As he showed righteousness vis-a-vis Potiphar's wife and trustworthiness in prison, here he also showed himself to be the better man than those around him. What was needed was not only Joseph's being there. That would not have helped if he had told his family to get lost and welcome to payback. What was needed was his forgiveness. He forgave, at least partly, because he did see this big picture and God's hand at work in it. But God's hand also needed Joseph to respond with mercy and joy in order to finish the job. Forgiveness is sometimes a sticky topic. It's an important topic since it is a foundation of our Christian faith. Let us merely ask ourselves, if in our own way we are in a position like Joseph, God may do some great, even big picture things, if we but forgive. mercy opened a floodgate, not only of emotions and reconciliation with family, but it blessed his people for years to come. Is it possible that all that is needed for God to open some other door of blessing is for you or me to forgive? Or accept the forgiveness that someone else is offering us? Sometimes that's not easy. If this is the case for any of us, does it help if we can perceive God's hand at work up to and beyond that? There's another way. Our Bible readings today show us giving what was needed. The story in Matthew does not show Jesus in his welcoming the little children and for God so loved the world mode. A woman asks him to cast a demon out of her daughter and he blows her off. Now maybe he was having a bad day. Jesus was fully human after all, and we do read of him being on the petulant side more than once in the New Testament. It goes against our preferred image of Jesus as the always welcoming God he so often is. But the story is there. And the fact that the gospel writers included it, knowing that it might seem out of character for him, is all the more reason to believe it really happened. Because it shows they were interested in presenting the truth unvarnished. This happened. Now this woman begs for help. He keeps on walking. He says, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And then when she confronts him again, she says, please help me. He says, it's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Now she's a Canaanite, not a Jew. It's true that Jesus consistently said that his primary mission was to call the Jewish people back to God. He calls her a dog. By inference, and healing her son would be like taking from his own people. The disciples are on his side, saying, yeah, get her to go away. She's bothering us. Well, a couple of things. First, this happens in the district of Tyre and Sidon. This was Gentile country. Presumably, Jesus wanted to get away from the scribes and Pharisees for a while, and no Jew who was not a disciple would be likely to follow him there. So by going to Gentile country, Jesus had to know something like this was going to happen. Secondly, the word for dogs here in the Greek, it's not the Greek word for the wild, untamed street dogs, which there is a Greek word for that kind of dog. That's not the word that's used here. The word used here is the diminutive of that, which means it's the word for doggy or a house pet. It's not so harsh. Is it possible, as the commentator William Barclay wrote, is it possible that just as you and I might call a friend an old villain, that how he said these words was not as harsh as the words themselves sound, or as we read them on paper? Is that possible? Anyway, we know how the story goes. She does not disagree with Jesus, but she points out that if he's going to think Canaanites are akin to dogs at the master's table, then at least they get something from the master's table. And he's pleasantly amazed, saying, woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish. She believed he had the power to do it. And she must have believed that his love really does extend to all people, even if he did come first for the lost sheep of Israel. In her persistence, and in not arguing Jesus' mission, he saw her faith. And Jesus showed his willingness to respond to faith wherever he found it. Some hear this uncomfortable story and imagine that Jesus was just trying to test her, as if she had to jump through a hoop and say the right words before he would inevitably heal her daughter. And she passed the test. I personally do not believe that. That only adds to the uncharacteristic picture we get of Jesus in this passage. Come on, say the right words. No, I think she caught him up short and pointed out that even Gentiles are within the scope of God's grace. Perhaps she knew that Israel's own prophets called Israel to be a light to the nations and bring salvation to Gentiles. William Barclay suggests that as she gave her bold reply, Jesus' eyes lit up with joy at such an indomitable faith, and he granted her the blessing of the healing that she so much desired. What was needed? Her faith, and also her ability to express that faith when it was crunch time. Jesus needed to hear this woman's retort of belief. She needed to speak words of humble faith. Sometimes you or I will be blessed and encouraged when someone speaks to us words of faith, just what was needed. You needed to hear that. I would not be here in this pulpit, nor probably be a Christian, if Bob Brody had not talked to me about Jesus on my mom's back porch in 1976 and suggested that I ask Christ into my heart. What was needed? I didn't even know that's what was needed. Are there times when, as speakers or listeners, what is needed are words and deeds of faith in the Lord? I have no doubt. That woman might be the patron saint of some of us. She said what was needed and got what she needed as well. Let us give thanks for when the people of God, like Joseph or the Canaanite woman, came through with what was needed.